So there are two questions that you could ask yourself in any given moment. One is, what am I committed to? And the other is, how am I organizing myself inside of that commitment? There's that which I'm committed to, and then there's that which I organize myself around. And so when we talk about the struggle is not real or the struggle is real, both of those are a commitment. And so in any given moment, we get to choose. Many years ago, my predecessor, Mark Anthony Lord, said to me, Lola, we have this student, and she has taken all of our classes, and she's been diligent in showing up for all of our classes. She's gone through our practitioner program, which is a 2-year intensive program. And it was always a struggle. Every turn for this person was a struggle. And he said to me, what you will find in this work here is that there will be those that cannot allow reality, capital R, to be. There are those among us that don't know who they are without struggle, without resistance. And so the inquiry this month is just to ask ourselves, how devoted am I to struggle? And do I organize myself around that? You always have a choice to organize yourself around the high idea that life is for you, or you're at the effect of life, it's happening to you. So just look right now in some area of your life, where does it really feel like the struggle is real? No. If you knew what I've been dealing with around this weight, let me tell you, it's real. I'll never forget years ago when I started taking classes here, I really started to develop an awareness of the narratives that run me, most of which I had inherited, both from my family of origin and the collective consciousness. And I didn't know they were running me. And so I really was in it like this is what's true and real. And one of my early teachers said, would you be willing to consider that that is just the way life occurs for you? And I said, I don't know what you mean by that, because this is actually what's happening. And he said, no, it's the way life occurs for you. And I said, I'm not really following this because this is actually what's happening. And he was like, young lady, are you unfamiliar with the word occurs? And I was like, well, I am not, and yet I am unfamiliar with it in this now moment, it seems. But it was a great interruption. We have it that life is a particular way based on the evidence that we have on our limited perspective. And we are so entrenched in this dimension of reality that we don't know, not because we can't. It's in fact an absence of discipline. Michael Beckwith calls it blisscipline. You could actually shift your context around the word of discipline into something that gives you greater freedom because you relate to it as blisscipline. So I was with Michael Beckwith this week, and I was inspired to revisit some of his work. And in his book, Spiritual Liberation, he writes, low-level anxiety overtakes our minds. Fear escalates negative change, while love escalates affirmative change. About an hour ago, I was in conversation with two gentlemen within this community. And in an effort to make small talk, I asked them if they would be watching the Super Bowl. Now, it's sort of a dangerous path to go on because I don't even know who is playing in the Super Bowl. And so And so I quickly said, please forgive me. Who is playing in the Super Bowl? And they said, the New England Patriots and the LA Rams. And I said, it seems like the Patriots play every year. What is that? And they explained to me that the particular coaching philosophy and strategy of that team is you have Tom Brady, who's like a superstar. I believe he is the quarterback. And then they basically pick up all kinds of players that have been thrown out and said they're not good enough. They're not cut out. And what this coach says is we can work with this. And so they start to work with these players, and I imagine, based on what these gentlemen shared with me, that they work at the level of the mind. And they start to affirm a new possibility. They start to raise the vibration of the conversation around these players such that they no longer see themselves as throwaways. Now, what did he say here? He said, low-level anxiety overtakes our minds. Fear escalates negative change while love escalates affirmative change. So do you know when you are beating up on yourself, you're actually digging yourself more deeply into the struggle? When you are beating up on the other, you're actually digging yourself more deeply into the struggle. The transcendent move is to rise above appearances and say, wait a second, what else could be possible? Now, here's the challenge with the struggle. You can fool yourself into thinking that your cause is noble, and thus, it's okay to struggle. Important to realize that so long as you are on what we call the drama triangle, the victim, villain, hero pattern, you're in the same dance. And we see this a lot with activists who come with great intentions. We have a lot of former activists in this community. People who have devoted themselves to high and holy work only to be undone by the struggle. And so what's really needed and wanted on the planet today is the ability to ascend or transcend the struggle so that you can look at what is existing in this dimension of reality but not be taken out by it. So, yeah. So let's just make a cost-benefit analysis of struggle, if you will. So the benefits of struggle, as far as I can tell, you're willing to add yours to this list. Avoidance of personal responsibility. Can you appreciate the one in you that would really rather not be responsible for this? It's just like too heavy a burden. I don't want to be responsible for this. It really is, life is happening to me. Another benefit of the struggle. It provides a reason for why our lives look and feel the way they do. It gives us an understanding. It's like, oh, okay, I get it. My life is the way it is because of this. Where is the locus of control? Outside of you. You are at the effect of life. You are disempowered. You're trapped. You're stuck. Let's look at the cost. The cost of struggle is disconnection from a greater reality. Notice the reality is capitalized. As I said, the struggle is not real, and struggle does exist. But if you know yourself, remember last week I brought in Howard Thurman, and he said the great opportunity is to develop one's spiritual character and awareness. More and more, as we begin to realize that we are high and holy beings, we are energy in form, we are less and less trapped by this world. The cost. There is a heavy weight to blame and criticism. It's hard on your body. It's hard on your immune system. It is fatiguing. an unending search for answers and understanding. In other words, existential suffering. The struggle will always yield existential suffering. You want to know what the great question that is asked that can give you an indication that you're in existential suffering? Why? That's it. If you're asking why, you're in existential suffering, and as one of my teachers would say, that, my friend, is the booby prize. It makes no difference why, in fact. It makes no difference. Fixation on what's wrong. That's your survival brain, your reptilian brain, that will get fixated on what's wrong, as if that's where the solution lives. Exhaustion, as I mentioned. To align yourself with struggle is to exhaust yourself. To align yourself with struggle is to exhaust yourself. And finally, a defeated worldview. When I was with Michael this week, we were speaking at an event in St. Petersburg, Florida, and he talked about having conscious naivete. And I thought, wow, that is brilliant. To have conscious naivete. Not suggesting that you can't see what is occurring on the planet that does not work, but if you're vibrating with that thing, you don't have the energetic capacity to be a place and space of shifting. But to walk on the planet such that you can see what's not working in your own life or in the world, and to be in a romantic relationship with it, a conscious naivete. If you're married, you know this. There are times where it's like, I just have to be in a little bit of naivete right here. Because if not, it looks very, what is the word, gloomy. Yeah? So imagine you have the capacity from a neurological perspective to be in a sober relationship with what's occurring on the planet, and then choose as a move to shift your energetic, the way you're organizing yourself. Remember the two questions: what am I committed to, and how am I organizing myself? So yes, I see that which is occurring. It appears that that is what's in my bank account. And now I'm going to have some conscious naivete and rise above the struggle. When I started taking classes here, I remember my brother came to service one Sunday, and I just had like a real cute look going on in those days. Like, I just was like, I was single, I was working it, I had my principles down, I would like walk to the train and my affirmations. And I have never been thought of as like a petite human. And at that point in my life, I still did have a story that a petite human was better than a thick human. And he came in one day, and he said, I never thought that I had a skinny sister. And I said, me either. But I am feeling myself. And when I started feeling myself, my physical body began to change with not much effort. Literally, weight started falling off of me. It had been weight that I was holding on as self-protection, as self-righteousness. Don't tell me how to look and be. I'll keep this on. And you change your mind, your world starts to change. Change your thinking, change your life. Now, don't send me an email about making skinny better. I'm not making skinny better anymore. Hence the 20 pounds since then. All right, so my intention for today is that we develop our awareness and our consciousness, your capacity to witness yourself. That is unique to the human experience. You actually have the capacity to watch yourself. When you notice you're in the trance of self, the ego identity, you do not have access to choice. You're in the trance of your personality, and anything could go the way it goes. So to continue to develop awareness, to notice your commitment to resistance, to notice your commitment to resistance. This shows up in the most subtle of ways. I arrived in St. Petersburg on Monday. An hour later, I got a message that my flight had already been canceled for Thursday. And I was like, oh, Lord. And I watched myself, Lola, choose. How do you want to be with this? It will yield a particular result. And I said to myself, that's so sweet of Southwest. I am, in fact, getting home on Thursday, so we're just going to create a new possibility. And so I reached out to United Airlines. They were very happy to accept the premium dollar of my money in short order. And I, in fact, did get home on Thursday. Now, yesterday I called T-Mobile, and I was in the trance of my personality. My son's port on his iPhone 8 wasn't working, and you told me I have Apple Care. And I see no small print about the fact that it's only good for 1 year. You're trying to get me? This is a racket. This is a scam. I didn't say all of that, but I could. This is a practice of self-awareness. You can extend grace with yourself, but please practice. You know, because we will do that, we will have the customer service rep at T-Mobile be like our arch nemesis. And it's like, this poor soul is just trying to do what they do. And they're just as confused about the Apple Care policy as I am, which was evidenced by the 4 conversations. Rest in the presence of love and move from stillness. The ability to move from stillness versus a triggered reactive state is a game changer in the collective consciousness of humanity. To move inside of a triggered reactive state perpetuates the notion that the struggle is real. To move from stillness affirms a new neural pathway that says, something else is available. Now, where we get confused is we can think that stillness and love looks sort of like nice. And so you can bring your challenger energy, and people can think, oh, there she is as a villain. Consider that that does not have to be true. That you can actually move as a challenging presence on the planet from the deepest and most profound place of love. One of my early teachers said, Lola, you are a pit bull for people. And I said, that's really true. That is true. So if we have an adolescent understanding of love, it'll look apathetic. If we have a mature relationship with love and with stillness, we can withstand however life shows up. So I want to create a little context. So we are not a religious community. We are a center that is interested in consciousness, which we would define as mental awareness, the capacity to see. And so this guy Jesus is not so much like an idol that we are interested in worshiping, but rather like a master teacher. Someone that came along in the evolution of humanity with a devotional practice. Now, to provide a little historical context, he was a Palestinian Jew. He was a rabbi that was under the occupation of Roman Empire. So there is a great theologian, that one of the great teachers of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King, named Howard Thurman. I reference him with some regularity. And he writes in his book, Jesus and the Disinherited, Jesus' message focused on the urgency of a radical change in the inner attitude of the people. Living in a climate of deep insecurity, Jesus, faced with so narrow a margin of civil guarantees, had to find some other basis upon which to establish a sense of well-being. He was the practitioner that came in and said to the people upon which he lived among, we must not place the source of our well-being in these outside circumstances and conditions. Those don't appear as if they're going to change immediately, but where we do have influence is in our inner world. At the time, the Roman Empire came out with 600 laws as an opportunity to catch the Jewish people at any opportunity, any movement to lock them up. Howard Thurman, by the end of his life, said, I don't even know that I can call myself a Christian, because the Christianity that exists in this society is not the walk of this man that I study named Jesus. In this book, Jesus and the Disinherited, he talks about the notion that, in fact, the walk of Jesus was really for the oppressed. Because the one place and space that no one can ever disrupt, unless you let them, is your mind. You know, I oftentimes will quote Elie Wiesel in his time in the concentration camp, and he would say that the soldier that is outside of these walls may have the experience of freedom, but there is an access to liberation that I experience that they will never know. And so we are living in a time where there's a great opportunity to refine that. This particular teaching became wildly popular around the time of the Great Depression. That's fascinating, because what it gave people access to was the notion that your well-being is not determined by the stock market. The great paradox is that to the extent that you realize the source of your salvation is not outside of yourself, you in fact avail yourself to greater opportunity. I have stood inside of this community in an official capacity for 6 years. And one of the reasons that this community is sort of like the foundation for me of the way I organize myself is because I really value equitable access to transformation. So as I've said before, no one has ever turned away from a class here. No one has ever turned away from the opportunity to access knowledge of self. That is fundamentally important to me. And I've also had a belief or a story that I don't want to bring this work into corporations. And I was talking to my friend yesterday, and I said, it's my own narrative of like, I'm not going to work for the man. And I start to feel into my days at Bank of America or Credit Suisse, and I think, I'm not going back there. But notice, there's a belief, there's a cosmology of thought that requires me and them. And my husband said, well, just for our balance sheet, would you be willing to loosen your commitment to that? And I doubled down, and I'm like, that's exactly why I won't do it. And he was like, but please. And I have resisted this one for years. And then one of our brilliant staff people, Jay, said to me this past week, like a novel concept, Lola, consider that you could go into a culture and transform it such that it could have a quantum impact. Now, I've heard that before, but something in the way Jay said it, I heard it newly. And so I recently started to organize myself around that possibility. And in 1 week's time, I have been asked to go into 2 publicly traded companies with no effort on my part. The way that you create is through your own mind. The devotion to struggle will yield more struggle. Biblically, Jesus said, "My yoke is pleasant and my burden is light." And you might say, how could that be? He was living in a time where he was the oppressed. He was living in a time where laws were coming out left and right. It was ripe to lock people up. We are living amidst a similar time that, based on basic identity issues, you can get blocked, you can get locked up, you can get marginalized, and to keep the mind free in the midst of that is the greatest warrior move of the human experience. That deems you a bodhisattva. So something happened this week with a man named Jussie Smollett. And I was sitting at lunch, and Michael was to my left, and he said, "Lola, did you see this?" And I said, "What?" And he said, Jussie Smollett from Empire was beaten, and at the time, chemicals were thrown on his body, and language was used around his racial identity and his sexual orientation. A noose was around his neck, and it happened in Chicago. And there was something very odd to not be in Chicago when I heard that. And it was like my whole being, just collapsed. And it's like, okay, so we just were being with that. And of course, what couldn't be lost on me is the notion that, in fact, this happens every day to people whose names are not Jussie Smollett. Now, in fact, the gift is, I guess, when it happens to a high-profile person, an awakening occurs on the planet. But let us not be naive. In 2018, 29 transgender people were murdered violently because of their identity. The struggle is not real, and the struggle does exist. So I reached out to a woman named Anna Deshawn, who's the president of the board of an organization called Affinity Community Services. It's a social justice organization based in Chicago that primarily serves the Black LGBTQ community with a specific emphasis on Black women. And Bodhi, because of the generosity that you create here, we are able to commit $1,000 in a gift to Affinity Community Services. So I thank you for your generosity. When something like that happens, it's a choice point in the evolution of humanity. Who will we be? The struggle is not real, and we manufacture a lot of suffering. Audre Lorde said something to the effect of, the problem is not that we have differences. The problem is that we refuse to celebrate our differences. The struggle is not real, and yet the struggle exists. It is manufactured inside of a thought pattern that is deeply devoted to the trance of separation. This community exists inside of a commitment, the way one organizes itself, inside of a philosophy called oneness, that there is only one of us here. And if we were to establish that as a truth statement in our being, we would walk on the planet very differently. We would see the presence of the infinite in all we meet. So, may we walk this month in a reminder that the struggle is not real. May we watch for the ways that we manufacture resistance in us and project it onto the movie screen of life and have it show up in someone else.